Hi, welcome back to Vital. I'm Val, your host, and I cover topics in wellness, things that aren't so well in wellness, and everything in between. I'm coming to you today with a special breaking news episode, a public service announcement that I could no longer keep to myself. Early last week, I was scrolling Instagram and I got an ad for Bryan Johnson's new supplement stack, and naturally I have some thoughts. If you don't know who Bryan Johnson is, he's the guy that spends like millions of dollars a year trying not to die. He's a big health guru, a biohacker. He's super into longevity. Because there is not a single force in this world that could keep me from sharing my unsolicited opinion online, I thought it was only appropriate to break down every single ingredient and every single product in the Blueprint stack. Let us not dilly-dally and get straight into it. So for the first product in this lineup, we have olive oil. And I actually don't take any issue with this at all. If you're an olive oil fanatic, maybe try it out on its own. However, there's a plethora of other really solid olive oil brands out there that primarily focus on olive oil. This isn't super groundbreaking stuff, but I can appreciate their level of testing on it. All right, the second product we have is the Nutty Pudding Mix. It cannot be understated how much I don't like this name, and saying it out loud feels even worse somehow, so I will not be repeating that. This is primarily pea and hemp protein. So for protein powders in general, by the way, there will be an entire episode dedicated to protein powder, especially plant-based ones, and my absolute disdain for them. So I'm not going to go into crazy detail today, but the context is coming, I promise. So pea and many other plant-based protein powders contain something called phytic acid and oligosaccharides, which are hard to digest and they can actually inhibit nutrient absorption. Peas are a legume, and legumes have to be soaked and or sprouted to neutralize these anti-nutrients like phytic acid, which is not done for protein isolates like this one. I get that they were probably trying to make everybody happy here by doing it plant-based, but as someone who is going to any lengths to expand lifespan, I actually find it pretty silly to prioritize vegan sources over the obviously superior animal ones. Pea protein is pretty low in 2 essential amino acids that are much easier to get from animal sources. Not that whey protein is necessarily better, since most powders are really heavily processed and therefore they lose a lot of their amino acids, but there are definitely a few ways to ensure a really highly bioavailable amino acid profile with whey protein that is much more minimally processed. Ironically, regular protein powder use and really any kind of high protein intake of lean protein, that includes chicken and turkey, if it doesn't come with dietary retinol, it can actually lower the vitamin A stores in the liver, which makes it harder for the body to utilize protein in an effective manner. And it makes it difficult for the body to create new protein or synthesize it. So it's not really an ideal way to intake protein if you're looking to build muscle in a really effective way. And since these powders are low in fat, it's going to make it harder for the body to absorb fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K, because these vitamins require fat to be absorbed. So these two things combined will lead to a vitamin A depletion. And the vitamin A depletion that often comes with regular protein powder consumption or even consumption of just lean proteins can lead to some of the following issues. Problems synthesizing new protein, reduced sex hormone production like testosterone, reduced thyroid hormone production, issues with vision health, and so much more. I'll go into much further detail on exactly how and why this happens during the protein powder episode, but I'm already mentally preparing for the science bros off of Reddit to come at me. So for the hemp protein isolate, overall, I'm not a big hemp protein fan for the myriad of reasons I just listed previously, but there's nothing specific to this that is extremely notable. All right, moving on. So next we have allulose, which is just a sugar alternative. However, there's no long-term studies on its effect on glucose and insulin because it's a newer sweetener. However, it can cause digestive problems due to the fact that it doesn't get absorbed super well, so it can essentially sit in the gut and ferment. All right, natural flavors. This is a catch-all term that means absolutely nothing. Most natural flavors are not natural. There are many FDA loopholes around this. I will be doing an entire in-depth episode on natural flavors as well, but essentially the FDA requires the originating source to be natural, but there's virtually no restriction to what can be done afterwards. So 99.999% of the time, these extracts are processed till kingdom come into some godforsaken mutation with additives and solvents and all kinds of super fun stuff that is not actually legally required to be disclosed to the end consumer. The FDA is neither protecting nor providing, like somebody's dusty son. So natural, not so natural flavors is definitely not my favorite ingredient to see. So next up we have sunflower lecithin. This is essentially an emulsifier, which means that it can help to easily combine something like oil and water together. It can also be used as a thickening agent. However, it also does affect the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, so a double whammy for the fat solubles. They literally can't catch a break. But because Blueprint does do pretty extensive testing, I'm not too concerned about the heavy metals and pesticides in this, but it is a big concern in other products since a lot of other brands are not checking for this, so just be aware of that when you peruse labels. Okay, we also have cocoa powder, grapeseed extract, and pomegranate extract, and I'm lumping these all together because these are essentially here for the same reason. It's for the polyphenols, which work as antioxidants. Cocoa is a really interesting choice, but I will cover that on its own in a later product because they sell just a cocoa powder. I don't take issue with the extracts at all, but the rest of the ingredients kind of ruin this product for me, especially the ones that can irritate digestion and interfere with nutrient absorption. So ultimately, this is kind of a borderline useless product. I think if you want protein, it makes more logistical sense to eat some grass-fed steak and get your polyphenols from a handful of blueberries and a nice piece of dark chocolate, which also sounds a lot more satisfying. Also, just as a PSA, as a former vegan, I can confidently say that vegan protein sources are inferior in regards to bioavailability and nutrient profile. So I'm very sorry if this hurts anyone's feelings, but I will be primarily referring to animal sources as they are more aligned with a diet that is looking to improve longevity and overall health. And a lot of the suggestions that I give will be based on animal proteins and animal fats. If you are vegan or vegetarian, I still don't think I would recommend this product for the reasons mentioned earlier, specifically around digestion, which is already a really big issue for a lot of people following these plant-based diets. All right, so next up we have the blueberry nut mix, and it is 3 very simple ingredients. It's just dried blueberries, roasted macadamia nuts, and roasted walnuts. This seems very innocuous, but believe it or not, there's actually a lot of really big issues here, primarily in how it's prepared. Just to start off, normally I would take issue with the fact that the blueberries are non-organic because berries are heavily treated with herbicides and pesticides, but it does seem like Blueprint actually does do extensive testing for this based on their certificate of analysis. However, their C of A mostly mentions pesticide residues. It's not super clear that the glyphosate is included in this. The USP and European standards kind of leave it up to the individual lab and manufacturer if they include herbicides in their pesticide residue test. But they do claim in another part of their website that they do glyphosate testing. So I think that it would make sense for them to call this out and include the glyphosate results in their C of A, since this is kind of a big deal in the wellness community. Outside of Blueprint, non-organic berries are something to watch out for in most other brands, though, because it is really unlikely that they're concerned with pesticide testing if they're non-organic. However, for this product, the blueberries are far from the issue. So macadamia nuts and walnuts are similar to legumes in that they contain phytates such as phytic acid and also oxalates. Phytic acid can actually bind to minerals like magnesium and iron and zinc and reduce the body's ability to absorb them. Oxalates, on the other hand, can bind to calcium and unfortunately lead to kidney stones. And that's not the kind of stones that the girlies want. Macadamia nuts do have a relatively low amount of this, so it's not a massive deal, but if you're consuming this daily, they do need to be properly soaked and or sprouted to neutralize the anti-nutrients and to avoid any kind of disruptions to gut health. Walnuts, on the other hand, do contain much higher amounts of phytic acid and oxalates in addition to enzyme inhibitors. Wow, the gang's all here. Enzyme inhibitors can actually affect digestive enzymes, which affect the body's ability to digest food and absorb nutrients. And short term, this can mean issues like bloating, but it can eventually lead to issues with the pancreas. So these really need to be sprouted, not roasted. and sprouting them can actually improve the bioavailability of the nutrients present. Speaking of roasting, high temperatures can create something called acrylamides, which are these chemicals that are neurotoxic and potentially carcinogenic. In general, nuts can be nutritious, but they can also be a really terrible snack choice unless they're prepared and sourced correctly. So this isn't specific to Blueprint, but non-organic nuts are also heavily treated with pesticides and herbicides like berries. And on top of that, they're full of these anti-nutrients that can have serious gut health implications. And same thing with nut butters, actually, that are processed without being sprouted. And maybe this should be its own episode, since I would consider the nut butter craze a massive nutritional psyop. They're really not healthy, and anyone saying otherwise slept through basic chemistry and nutrition. Humanity was not meant to consume copious amounts of nuts and seeds. Our ancestors were not processing these by the pound and cranking out Costco-sized almond butters for their morning oatmeal on the regular. Since Blueprint does do pesticide testing, the anti-nutrients are the biggest concern here. I would 100% avoid this product because gut health is critical to overall health, and nuts can just be a really bad source of digestive issues. So basically, this is just a glorified trail mix. You can buy a 5-pound bag of organic frozen blueberries at Costco for like $15 and put those bad boys in your morning smoothie. You can get wild blueberries and get an even higher polyphenol concentration and way more health benefits from that. You can get organic nuts by the pound and soak them overnight yourself. You do not need to buy overpriced trail mix. There are also brands out there that do sell organic sprouted nuts and seeds, so I would personally opt for those. And actually, I personally do. My favorite is the sprouted pumpkin seeds. They're good on literally everything, and they're also kind of cute. All right, the next product that we have is called the Longevity Mix, and this is this powder that I guess you mix into water and you're supposed to drink on a daily basis. So the first ingredient we have is allulose, which we just covered that. That is the sweetener. I don't know that I would feel comfortable drinking that on a regular basis, especially because it's been associated with so many digestive issues. I would probably opt to avoid that. There are also so many natural flavors. Good Lord. We've already covered the natural flavors, and I will be doing a separate episode to dive much deeper into that. Okay, citric acid. Normally I would hate this, but they do seem to test for mold, so whatever, there are honestly bigger pressing issues in this formula. Monk fruit, relatively harmless, but there's already a sugar alternative, so why do we need another one? And then we have red radish for natural color. This is fine. So one of the first vitamins that we have on here is vitamin C as ascorbic acid. Okay, sure, but at 250 milligrams, no. I don't know what studies they use to inform the dosage, but you generally want something higher than this for it to have like real effects. You also want to have ascorbic acid with bioflavonoids for it to work well. Vitamin C is a complex, and ascorbic acid is just like the outer ring of the molecule, and it works much more synergistically when paired up with bioflavonoids. I won't go as far as to say that only whole food sources of vitamin C are good, as high-dose vitamin C in the form of ascorbic acid has done a lot in terms of disease treatment, but I do think that vitamin C should be its own supplement. To be honest, it's just never very good in these multivitamin mixes that I see. Okay, magnesium as magnesium citrate. This one actually legitimately made me mad when I saw it. Citrate is technically very bioavailable. However, 150 milligrams is not anywhere, not even in the same zip code, as near enough to replenish magnesium at levels that are beneficial for basic cellular function, especially since almost everything increases magnesium burn rate, including calcium, which is like the fourth ingredient in the supplement. I mean, seriously, 150 milligrams might only be enough in a parallel universe where our food and environment doesn't completely suck. On top of that, citrate also has a negative effect on ceruloplasmin, which is this protein in our blood that helps to regulate copper and iron. The citrate molecule will bind to copper ions like a leech. It decreases how much active copper is in the bloodstream, and that's going to have a negative effect on iron metabolism. Fun fact, copper deficiency and iron overload is already a major issue, and this is only going to make things worse for cellular function. So yet again, this does require its own episode because the connection and interaction of iron, copper, zinc, and ceruloplasmin is complex, long, and also critically important. And these three minerals are like the epitome of that meme from Harry Potter where it's like, why is it when anything happens, it's always you three? This is it. This is the three. So next we have creatine, and this is fine. I don't personally supplement it, but if you're looking to build muscle, creatine can be super helpful for that, so I don't take issue with this at all. Calcium. I just did an entire episode on how calcium disrupts mineral balance. Truly exceptional thinking to mix this in with the magnesium citrate. I think I might need to pick up chain smoking. All right, glucosamine sulfate. All right, so this is good for joints because it supports cartilage. But bone broth is extremely rich in glucosamine, and I personally would just drink that because it would honestly cover a lot of what these supplements are trying to do. And it has even more benefits like having collagen and chondroitin. And when you consume something with both chondroitin and glucosamine, there's actually a synergistic effect than if you just take one on its own. So this supplement doesn't have chondroitin in it, so again, I would opt for something that has both. There are supplements that do both if, this is just something you really want to supplement for whatever reason, but I think bone broth is a much better option. Okay, next we have taurine, and taurine is great. It's one of the essential amino acids, but you can also get that from bone broth or just by eating meat. Fun little game. Take a shot every time I say bone broth. You won't survive the rest of this episode. So glycine is next up. This is another essential amino acid that bone broth is very rich in. However, I'm sure you guys are not surprised, but I have some hot takes on oral glycine supplementation. So first, the reason that it's in this formula, I suspect, is because glycine lowers methionine, which is another essential amino acid. But methionine creates homocysteine, yet another amino acid that can damage the arteries and cause tumors when it's present in high levels. So that's why I think it's in here, because obviously having tumors is not conducive to living a long life. However, vitamin B6, B12, and B9 actually do more to lower methionine than glycine, and they play a really important role in the metabolism of homocysteine. So all of these vitamins are present in meat in very adequate doses. And actually, serine, which is another amino acid that's present in like shellfish and eggs, and you guessed it, meat, serine and glycine from natural food is better for lowering methionine. So natural food being meat, like the good quality stuff, not the factory farmed abomination. In this case, skin on would be the most nutritious choice, and on top of lowering methionine, you're also getting a lot of nutrients. Also, oral glycine supplementation has also been shown to increase oxalate production, so be mindful of that if you already have kidney issues, because this can increase the likelihood of kidney stones. Once again, not the kind of stones that the girlies want. Okay, so we also have lysine, which is yet another amino acid. This is important since the body can't make it on its own, and it plays an important role in collagen production and immune responses. But again, this is present in eggs and meat and some seafood. Bone broth will also have this. Oh my god. I literally feel like the propaganda arm for Big Bone Broth right now. Can one of y'all sponsor me already? I'm doing the Lord's work here for shareholder value. I'll actually take some shares too. Like, which one of these companies is public? Anyway, I don't really fully understand why this needs to be in a longevity formula. It's very easy to get this from diet alone, unless you're suffering from like herpes, in which case you can get lysine on its own in higher doses. Ashwagandha. I am trying so hard not to lose my mind right now. You guys already know how I feel about this. I made an entire episode on ashwagandha and its SSRI-like effects on serotonin, and it has serious risks associated with long-term use. It just really varies from person to person, and I don't think people should be taking this daily, especially at, 600 milligrams a day? That is like the highest most research recommends. And daily? Yeah, none for me, thanks. This definitely should not be taken for longer than 30 days at a time. You should definitely be speaking to a doctor before taking ashwagandha, or if you plan on staying on ashwagandha for a long time. 600 milligrams a day is a lot. This is actually kind of shocking. Ooh, this is a fun one. Okay, so this is glutathione, and this is our master antioxidant. It's really good stuff, but you can get the precursors for glutathione from a good diet. Also, vitamin C is crucial for glutathione production. It helps turn the oxidized form of glutathione into its reduced form. So, blast from the past, if you listen to my oxidative stress episode, glutathione is an antioxidant that helps to neutralize free radicals. And when it does that, it essentially gets oxidized itself, and it needs vitamin C to regenerate it, simply put. So just taking a good vitamin C complex, like we learned earlier, not just ascorbic acid on its own, but taking just vitamin C would do more than this supplement at 250 milligrams. That's not a lot. Not to mention that oral glutathione supplements are just not very bioavailable. Glutathione is made up of 3 different components, and when you take it orally, it gets broken down during digestion by enzymes into those 3 components, which are glutamine, cysteine, and glycine. So these amino acids are absorbed, and then they have to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So they essentially have to reform the glutathione again after it gets broken down. So you might as well just ingest those 3 components on their own, 2 of which are found in beef bone broth, and cysteine can be found in chicken bone broth. All right, we also have theanine. Not many notes here. It can be beneficial for anxiety and sleep, so you can get this from green tea and mushrooms. I think it's helpful to those who need it. I would just probably opt for a good natural source, though. However, if you're struggling with anxiety and sleep, this is certainly something you can try. It's better than prescription medication, but maybe just outside of this specific supplement, maybe try it on its own. And last but not least, sodium hyaluronate, aka hyaluronic acid. This is generally used for joint and skin health. I feel pretty neutral about this. However, surprise, surprise, bone broth would provide similar benefits, but this is just a more concentrated source. Although research on oral hyaluronic acid is still relatively new, so I will check back on this in like a year or two once we have a little bit more information. I found that the research that's out now is not super strong yet. So overall, this is a pretty basic multivitamin with some unfortunate additives. There's a lot of room for improvement to make this truly a longevity drink. Honestly, also kind of useless if you just eat a good diet, have clean water, and take some magnesium and vitamin E for extra antioxidants. Maybe throw in some vitamin C if you're not very keen on eating citrus fruits. Although guavas are in season right now, and those are a phenomenal source of vitamin C, and they're super delicious. So I would personally opt for that. All right, so the next product is NAC, ginger, and curcumin. Okay, some notes. This needs to be organic, without a doubt. Curcumin is good stuff, but it's not very bioavailable on its own. It actually needs black pepper. I actually think this is like pretty basic science. Most curcumin formulations worth anything will add black pepper to increase absorption because it can increase absorption by something like 2,000%. Ginger is good. It's anti-inflammatory, but it should be organic, especially for the price. Honestly, it's not the biggest deal since they do the pesticide testing, although it's not really just pesticides that are always the issue. Sometimes it's just the way that it's grown, and in the kind of soil that it's grown, they can actually impact the overall nutrient profile. So I just personally prefer organic because you can get more medicinal properties per gram. NAC is solid stuff, but I'm actually not a huge fan of supplementing it. But honestly, it's a really common biohack, so my view on it is more of a personal preference. If you're vegetarian, you're going to have a harder time getting the amino acids necessary for your body to make NAC naturally, so in some cases it makes sense to supplement. Overall, this is probably the least offensive supplement in the bundle, to be honest, although the lack of black pepper really irritates me because this is just like very common herbal knowledge, especially for somebody that I'm sure spent a lot of money paying, experts to formulate something like this. If you average out the total bundle cost, it comes out to something like around $50 per product. You can get a really good NAC supplement for way cheaper than that, and a much better magnesium for almost half that. All right, so next we have the red yeast rice and garlic supplement. And this one is a little bit more controversial because red yeast rice is primarily used for lowering cholesterol, and it does so through this compound called monocolin K. It's essentially a statin, like lovastatin, and it inhibits this enzyme that creates cholesterol in the liver. It seems like it mostly targets LDL, commonly known as the bad cholesterol, although it's a lot more complicated than that. But it does affect overall cholesterol as well. I have some hot takes on cholesterol, and believe it or not, there will be a full-length episode going into it soon. I think there are much better and safer ways to manage high LDL levels without inhibiting production through a statin-like mechanism. The other thing that came out of a lot of these studies is that monocolin K can seriously damage the liver, depending on the dosage. However, to me, this seems like a clever and tricky marketing strategy because the FDA actually banned the sale of supplements with high enough amounts of monocolin because it was considered an unapproved statin drug at that point, since it's chemically identical to the leading drug on the market, lovastatin. So manufacturers have to keep the levels of monocolin low enough to not be considered a drug. But according to the Blueprint website, theirs is about 10 milligrams, which is on the lower end, but it's on the lower end of a prescription dose. So this might actually face some regulatory issues in the future if they haven't run into it already. Like I mentioned before, some things to be aware of are the side effects, which include muscle pain, liver enzyme changes, and digestive issues. But specifically the liver enzymes, I would not ever take this without consistently getting labs done to make sure that those liver enzymes aren't crazy elevated. I personally would not take this because of the potential liver damage. Even though it's a lower dose, I still think that this is pretty powerful enough for the FDA to ban it. And we all know that the FDA is useless. So for them to ban something, like, it's got to be pretty freaking bad. Garlic, obviously garlic is good for you, but again, not organic. Just eat some food with garlic in it. Like, honestly, that sounds so much more enjoyable. Get you that garlic pasta, girl or boy. We're inclusive here. Okay, so for the additives, there's really only one that I take issue with, and that is the dicalcium phosphate. So if you listen to the calcium episode, like a great listener, you might recognize some similarities here. So dicalcium phosphate is really similar to calcium in that it can calcify the arteries and kidneys through the buildup of calcium salts in the tissues, but it can also inhibit magnesium absorption. In my humble professional opinion, I think it is exceptionally ironic for this additive to be present in a supplement that is meant to support heart health. So this next product isn't part of the stack, but it's available for sale as a standalone product on their website. They have this coca powder that is taking me out. Not only is it not organic, why not just do cacao, which is higher in polyphenols and flavonols. Cacao is less processed, retains more antioxidants and magnesium because it's less heat treated. It's also really nice for smoothies and consuming it raw, which is, I see kind of how they're suggesting you take the cocoa. And coca, on the other hand, which is what's available here, is typically more used for baking. I don't think I fully understand why they're selling this. This is like the epitome of no thoughts, just vibes. I would for sure just get cacao. If you want polyphenols and you like delicious chocolatey flavor, 100% just go get like a massive bag of organic cacao. No further notes. All right, let's take a peep at the essential capsules. Also, real quick side note for context, I do not believe most of the standard RDAs or the recommended daily allowances for supplements. The FDA was 100% smoking crack whenever they came up with those. Most of those numbers are what's needed to like survive, not necessarily thrive. That being said, some of the RDAs for certain vitamins are astronomically high for no reason. All right, the first one listed here is vitamin D. I have some very controversial views on vitamin D, particularly in regards to the difference between stored vitamin D and active vitamin D. Typically, when people are testing low for vitamin D, it's not necessarily because they have low vitamin D, it's because they're low in active and they just need something to kind of act as a catalyst to convert the stored into the active. Fun fact, magnesium plays a massive role in the conversion process of stored into active. And vitamin D also affects a lot of other important minerals that are usually in a depressingly severe deficit in a large amount of people. I will be doing a whole separate episode on vitamin D because it is an almost overwhelming amount of information to try to fit into this podcast. But essentially, high doses like the one present in this supplement will negatively affect vitamin A uptake, which we kind of discussed earlier when I was talking about retinol and protein powders. But in turn, this has serious implications for copper and iron uptake. And the form that's in the supplement is the inactive form, which requires a significant amount of magnesium to convert into active D so that your body can actually utilize it. Not only is this process going to deplete whatever meager magnesium stores the majority of people have, it's also not even going to be useful if you're magnesium deficient in the first place, which most people are. And at that point, it can actually become a health hazard more than anything. If you listen to my calcium episode, I talked about how many minerals and vitamins have this really delicate balance between each other. And when we look at blood lab results and we see that vitamin D or zinc or whatever else is low, and then we prescribe a multivitamin such as this, or even a single vitamin with a really high dose to raise it, we are missing the entire point. There is an underlying reason why those levels are low, and 99% of the time, it has nothing to do with whether or not we're taking a $60 multivitamin. This is a very reductionist view, and it's no different than the pharmaceutical approach of a pill for every ill, except that prescriptions have been replaced almost one-to-one with supplements. Again, this is kind of missing the entire point of a more natural and comprehensive approach to health. Low vitamin D levels could be attributed to low magnesium levels, which are, again, critical for converting stored D into active D. It could be due to conversion issues, which are often caused by other mineral imbalances and high-dose supplementations of other vitamins. So, short story long, not a fan of vitamin D, especially at this high dosage. All right, vitamin E. Ooh, you guys know I love vitamin E. I talk about it almost as much as I talk about magnesium, bone broth, and the word context, but 64 milligrams is really, really low. I also prefer a vitamin E supplement that uses mixed tocopherols, not just alpha. Studies very clearly show that the protective antioxidant properties are significantly stronger and much more effective when you combine alpha, beta, and gamma. There's actually like 8, I think, different active forms of vitamin E, but those 3 are the most widely used in supplements. All right, so the next list of like 8 or 9 vitamins are all different flavors of B vitamins. Thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, folate, B12, biotin. I don't hate the supplemental forms of it. I like B3 as niacinamide, as that's the precursor for niacin. I actually take a niacinamide supplement on its own, but this formula has way too low of a dose at 15 milligrams. Ripley's Believe It or Not, you can get most B vitamins from eating meat or from beef organ supplements, if that's your thing. They're actually quite abundant in organ meats. And niacinamide specifically is really great for cellular function and a whole lot of other things that I won't get into right now. And even at higher doses, this is one of the few things that I take and I'm totally cool with supplementing. Because of all the other crap in this formula, though, I think if you want to supplement B vitamins, just get a specific one, 2 B vitamins. All right, next we have calcium. I'm not even going to waste my breath on talking about calcium for the 40th time. I think you get the point on this one. So iodine. Iodine can be very helpful to supplement. It's necessary for healthy thyroid function. I don't think everybody needs to supplement this, though. Most people just need to not be scared of high quality salt. Other forms is like various forms of seaweed. I love a good seaweed salad. So, if that's your thing, that's a great source of iodine. If not, just get some really high quality sea salt. All right, next up we have zinc. And I already know I'm going to piss off a lot of people with this one. But zinc is another one of those that not everybody needs to be taking. It can deplete bioavailable copper, which is needed for ceruloplasmin function. Copper deficiency on top of zinc excess is a health disaster in the form of neurodegenerative diseases, anemia, lowered immune function. I can go on for a long time, but I won't. Zinc and copper have to be present in a very specific ratio in the body, And a lot of the advice and supplements I see online is having people take zinc without any consideration for copper. Like I mentioned earlier, zinc, copper, iron are like the trifecta that can kind of make or break your health. And this is kind of more of an aside because this is a little bit more related to iron, but I did mention anemia, so I feel compelled to mention this. If you're anemic, a lot of times the iron that's present in your tissues is not making it into your bloodstream because of a lack of copper, not because of a lack of an iron supplement. And I will definitely cover that in a future episode. Also, those that are on a carnivore diet are much more likely to have zinc excess, which is a main reason why I'm not really a huge fan of the carnivore diet, especially long term. And copper deficiency can actually lead to histamine intolerance because the body removes histamine via the DAO enzyme, which has very specific vitamin requirements. One of the main ones being, you guessed it, copper. Even if you're consuming foods that are rich in copper, it can actually still not be enough because they are often also high in zinc and or iron, like liver or oysters. So it really comes down more to looking at the ratios as opposed to just the amount of a single vitamin. Honestly, I'm so over seeing these clinical doses. This is just clownery at its finest. Most people do not need clinical doses. They need the proper ratios of these minerals. Selenium, you can get your selenium needs from eating like 3 Brazil nuts a day. Seafood is also a really good source. If you are supplementing iodine for thyroid function, selenium is important to keep in balance. So just keep that in mind. That's whether you're actually like supplementing an iodine supplement or, increasing your intake of iodine through seaweed or other natural sources. So next up, we have manganese. This is an important mineral, but you don't need to supplement this if you're drinking good quality water, which should be the first order of business before even looking at supplements. I am so serious. Do not even look at the supplement aisle until you have good filtered water that is remineralized with high quality trace minerals. This is such a critical aspect of getting your health in order. I am begging you guys to drink good quality water above everything. Okay, so for the latter half of the supplement facts here, we have genistein. Not a huge fan of this. This is a phytoestrogen that can be found in various foods like soybeans and lentils. And there were some earlier studies that indicated that they could have protective heart health properties. The research just wasn't super strong, to be honest. One study showed that higher genistein levels impaired blood flow in women over 50. That's bad. And heart disease in general can present itself differently in women versus men. So different supplements can have varying effects. In supplement doses, it could potentially cause an imbalance in reproductive hormones. Some studies indicate that it's very dose dependent and it can actually affect the growth of reproductive organs. Again, not great, but that it eventually will course correct. Even a lot of studies on this are very conflicting, but because I personally do not consume a lot of phytoestrogenic foods, because for my body and hormones, they would be quite detrimental, I don't think that this is something I would feel comfortable supplementing daily as part of a longevity routine. I think women in particular need to be very wary of this, especially older women. I think this should be tailored to the individual, and I actually think it's kind of risky to put this specific ingredient into a formula that is meant for everybody. Okay, so now we have nicotinamide riboside. This is just another form of vitamin B3 or niacinamide. It's a newer form of it though, and it is shown to be very effective at converting into NAD+ in the body. NAD+ is a coenzyme, so just think of it as this little helper molecule. And it's present in every cell in the body, and it is pretty critical to tons of metabolic processes, including mitochondrial function. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. This new form of it is kind of like the new it girl on the block. She's fresh, she's fun, she's flirty. We love her. Unfortunately, the rest of the formula kind of ruins it for me. I'm actually very interested in experimenting with this instead of my regular niacinamide supplement that I take, so I will report back. So next we have rhodiola root. This is really great for cognitive function, but it also acts on the immune system, so just watch out if you have autoimmunity. 300 milligrams is a fine dosage, but I would be concerned for people that do have autoimmunity, which is a depressingly high number. So Okay, now we have broccoli seed extract. This is not formulated with the enzyme needed to convert into sulforaphane, which is what's going to provide the health benefits that comes from broccoli seeds. And your body isn't really guaranteed to have the enzyme needed to break it down. Curious choice, but who am I to judge? So, fisetin is a flavonoid that has antioxidant properties, and it can promote longevity through a couple of different functions. Primarily, that it is able to induce cell death in cells that are past their prime, so to speak. They stop dividing, and so they accumulate and cause a mess, kind of like that pile of laundry you haven't put away in that chair that stares at you in the middle of the night. You know who you are. The other way that it supports longevity is through inhibiting this one pathway that basically allows the body to clean up said useless cells. So, strawberries are an incredible source of this. The 100 milligram dosage is on the lower end of what most supplements offer, though, and even on the lower end for many of the studies done on this. I don't see anything particularly wrong with supplementing this. If you're like super into biohacking, go knock yourself out. All right, next up we have luteolin. Studies indicate that this can induce cell death in cancer cells and could be used for pain management for things like fibromyalgia and a bunch of other stuff. This is a flavonoid, so it can be found naturally in foods, but this is a pretty cool one if you're prone to mast cell activation. Flavonoids in general will have this effect, but some are just more efficient than others. I don't see any issues with this being in here, although it would probably be more effective in a liposomal form. All right, we have ubiquinol as reduced CoQ10. I like ubiquinol, but the dosing is on the lower end. I suppose it's fine for just basic maintenance, but everyone's going to have slightly different dosing needs on this. All right, we have lactobacillus. This is really just a massive hodgepodge. This is a lot of units of the same bacteria, which can lead to a monoculture in the gut, which can lead to gut health problems. A probiotics hate episode is coming very soon, but in the meantime, just eat real fermented food, as that will have a much higher variety of bacteria. All right, we also have spermidin. Supposedly this helps to remove cell waste, but studies are still ongoing in regard to supplementation of this. There are natural sources of this like grapefruit, but the research is still relatively new and there's quite a few competing narratives. The 10 milligrams in this formula is shown to be ineffective in some triple blind studies, while other studies show that 10 milligrams is kind of the max you want to take. I think this is one of those that we'll just have to see on because it's very new to the market. I think if you're a die-hard biohacker and really want to try this out, perhaps find this in a supplement form on its own. However, I am not endorsing this one way or the other. So we also have boron, and I think boron supplementation can be super helpful for a wide assortment of things like increasing testosterone and helping with bone health, as it's pretty anti-arthritic. The dosing here is pretty standard for a multivitamin, but this one is one of those supplements that if you're a man and you want to experiment with it, definitely get it on its own and play around with the dosage that works for you. 3 milligrams is on the lower end. However, one thing to keep in mind is that boron supplementation will decrease levels of certain vitamins like C, B2, and B6. So just be sure you're frequently running labs and keeping an eye on those numbers. There's a pretty high chance you might have to supplement those to make up for any loss. We also have lithium as the last ingredient here. I think you need a much higher dose than 1 milligram. Okay, so we are moving on to the next product, which is called the Essential Soft Gels. We shall see how essential they are. So the first 2 ingredients on the list are lutein and zeaxanthin. These are both carotenoids that are beneficial for eye health commonly, but they do get converted into vitamin A, so it's essential for cell health, immune response, a lot of different things, although the conversion process is really not very efficient. Another thing to note is that you need dietary fat in order for your body to absorb these well. Neither is very bioavailable in supplement form, so you're honestly just better off eating some farm fresh eggs, which have both fats and carotenoids. So next up, we have lycopene, which is another carotenoid, beta-carotene specifically. It's responsible for the red color you see in foods like tomatoes, Ironically, though, the absorption of this is impaired by calcium supplementation. It's also fat soluble, which means it should really be consumed with fats to improve bioavailability. I think if you eat a healthy diet, you don't really need to supplement this. Also, you should be very careful if you have low blood pressure because this could lower it even further, especially in larger doses. We also have astaxanthin, yet another carotenoid. You should be really careful if you're on blood thinners or blood clotters if taking this. I'm personally just not a huge fan of supplementing carotenoids because it can affect steroid and thyroid metabolism. So things like estrogen and androgens, cortisol, it can also interfere with iodine metabolism, which is really important for thyroid health. Maybe this should have been its own little episode since I feel like carotenoids are supplemented so frequently. I'm going to be glued to my microphone at this rate. Okay, so lastly, we have vitamin K1, K2 in the form of MK4, and K2 in the form of MK7. I love a good vitamin K, and I like K2 in the form of MK4 and MK7. I personally would take a vitamin K supplement on its own, not as part of a multivitamin as evidenced by the rest of the ingredients in here. But I don't think there's any issues supplementing vitamin K as long as you're doing it in the right forms. So we are finally at the end of these ingredients. And I think for the first time in my life, I'm actually legitimately tired of talking. I'm kidding, obviously. A few parting words for you. Any of the good stuff in here is negated by the more unfortunate choices that can either directly inhibit the absorption of the vitamins and minerals that you want, or potentially cause damage if you're not already in a balanced state when it comes to vitamins and minerals. So this is just a little bit unfortunate for me, especially at the price point and especially given how well regarded this individual is in the kind of fringe science medical community. If it wasn't obvious from the last 45 minutes of me talking, I don't really like the multivitamin approach. And to play devil's advocate on my own point, I understand that many people do not have a good diet and they don't have the time to research the best individual supplements, or maybe even the financial ability to get extensive testing done to understand their bio-individuality. And so a multivitamin sometimes is better than nothing at all. But because this is, from what I can tell, aimed at those who want to dip their toes into biohacking or just kind of take their health to the next level and have the disposable income to spend over $300 a month on supplements, in this case, you are far, far better off getting a comprehensive blood panel, getting an HTMA test done, and seeing where you're at. And then understanding why some of your vitamin and mineral levels are off instead of blindly supplementing just for the sake of raising levels. Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes that might be counterproductive, like in the case of vitamin D or calcium. This isn't to say that I don't believe in supplements. I take them myself, but I do think that they should be very intentional and well-informed, because just because something is a vitamin or a mineral doesn't automatically make it good for you in general for the population, and also you specifically to your own bio-individual needs. Another thing is sometimes you don't actually need the clinical strength doses. I've said this before and I'll say it again, it 100% comes down to the ratios of the vitamins and minerals in relation to each other, not in isolation or how a single vitamin performed in a lab test. Can these tests and studies inform us? Absolutely. Just so far as to inform the relationship between certain ailments and potential treatment doses. However, for the vast majority, an optimized diet will not only be more effective, it's also probably going to be safer, so you're not mega dosing your way into potential illness. Now, I want to make this abundantly clear one more time. So many people have such an abhorrent diet that it is extremely likely that they will get some benefit from these types of supplements simply because their body is literally starved for nutrients. It almost doesn't matter what dose it's in. However, it will eventually catch up, likely sooner rather than later, and more often than not, I see a plateau before seeing a decline in health. If you want a little thrill, maybe ruin your life in a more interesting way, like dating a DJ. So for those of you who are actually wanting to better your health, assuming, an already somewhat balanced diet, it would be a much better investment to take that same $300 a month, get very high quality organ meats, eggs, and other animal foods alongside seasonal fruits and vegetables, and maybe some very good magnesium and vitamin E supplements, and then tailor those supplements to your individual needs. And of course, please, please, I beg you, drink good, clean water. Also, another thing I really want to note is that it's not always about adding a vitamin or mineral. Sometimes optimal health requires us taking something away because of the aforementioned process of balancing these essential nutrients out. Overall, I don't think this is necessarily terrible quality, but I don't think that these formulations are much different than others I've seen in the market outside of just having quote unquote clinical doses. I can commend their level of testing. I appreciate the transparency of not only the in-depth ingredient lists, but also having all of the testing results. But to be honest, if a random celebrity put this out, I would not be surprised in the least. But for someone who is, supposedly an expert biohacker and basically has unlimited resources, I am a little bit disappointed. I don't think that this is the type of top-tier product and research I was expecting to come out when I saw the supplement stack, especially for somebody that's been kind of experimenting with the scientific fringes of longevity. And personally, I do think that it's missing a lot of the things that do actually have a significant impact on age span. Personally, if I was spending $2 million a year on health, I would live to be like 300 years old, still doing Pilates in a matching set, period. And imagine Bryan Johnson could have gotten away with it if it wasn't for some pesky granola girl with a microphone and a yapping addiction. What a time to be alive. I would be more than happy to put together an episode on longevity and some of the interesting things that I see coming out in terms of research and some things that have been around for a long time and even the types of biohacks that I'm personally partial to. Completely shameless plug, I recently launched a newsletter, except it's not a newsletter, it's more of a column, and I will answer questions that are sent to me and cover topics that I don't feel like covering on a podcast, a la Carrie Bradshaw. If you're so inclined, sign up below in the link, as the first installment of this email Q&A will be coming out very soon. But until then, I hope that this has been informative, educational, and most importantly, entertaining. I encourage you to share this episode with everybody you know because I want more listeners, because I'm vain and I care about analytics. Until next time.